Los Angeles history in the 60s and 70s, the smog crisis that changed the city. In the mid-20th century, Los Angeles was often seen as the city of the future, a paradise of endless sunshine, palm-lined streets, and wide-open freeways. Families from across the United States flocked west, drawn by promises of clean air, new jobs, and modern living. But when they arrived, many were shocked to find a very different reality. By the 1950s and into the 60s, Los Angeles was drowning in smog so thick that the sun would vanish for days. What had once been marketed as a utopia had become a choking, polluted city struggling to breathe. This wasn't just an eyesore, it was deadly. The Los Angeles smog crisis forced leaders, scientists, and residents to confront the price of progress and the environmental cost of rapid urban growth, shaping environmental policy for generations to come. Reports of hazy skies in Los Angeles dated back to the 1940s, when residents complained of burning eyes, irritated throats, and shortness of breath. But by the 1950s and early 60s, the problem had exploded into a full-blown environmental disaster. The geography of Los Angeles made matters worse. The city sits in a natural basin surrounded by mountains, which trap air and pollutants. On hot days, temperature inversions act like a lid, keeping toxic chemicals close to the ground. Combine that with postwar growth, millions of new cars, booming factories, and expanding oil refineries, and you had the perfect recipe for disaster. Between 1940 and 1960, Los Angeles County's population doubled. Freeways stretched in every direction, encouraging even more car ownership. In 1940, around 1 million cars were registered in LA County. By 1960, that number had tripled to more than 3 million. Every single one of those vehicles burned leaded gasoline, releasing hydrocarbons and nitrogen oxides that mixed with sunlight to form a new and mysterious enemy, photochemical smog. At the time, no one truly understood what was happening. Residents only knew that the air burned their eyes, made them cough, and filled the city with a thick yellow-brown haze. On the worst days, visibility was so poor that drivers had to turn on their headlights at noon. In 1954, one of the most severe smog attacks in Los Angeles history blanketed the city for weeks. Hospitals were overwhelmed with patients suffering from respiratory illnesses. Asthma cases spiked dramatically, and several deaths were directly linked to the polluted air. Experts now believe many more people died prematurely from heart and lung conditions aggravated by the smog. Scientists struggled to find the cause. Some blamed backyard trash incinerators. Others pointed to oil refineries or factory smoke. A few even thought the smog came from natural sources. The truth didn't become clear until a Caltech chemist named Ari Haagen-Smit began studying the phenomenon in the early 1950s. His groundbreaking research revealed that smog was caused when car exhaust and industrial emissions reacted with sunlight, a discovery that would change the world's understanding of air pollution forever. It became painfully clear that Los Angeles wasn't simply cursed by its geography. The city was poisoning itself with cars and oil. But how could it fix the problem without destroying its own economy? Cars and petroleum weren't just industries, they were the heartbeat of Los Angeles. Even before Haagen-Smith's discovery, local leaders had begun to act. In 1947, the state legislature created the Los Angeles County Air Pollution Control District, the first agency of its kind in the nation. This bold move marked the beginning of America's fight against air pollution, a fight that defined Los Angeles throughout the 1960s and 70s. By the time the 1970s arrived, the city had become both a symbol of environmental failure and a pioneer in clean air innovation. The crisis forced Los Angeles to reinvent itself, leading to new technologies, stricter emissions laws, and a growing public awareness of humanity's impact on the environment. The smog that once hid the sun became the catalyst for a revolution, one that reshaped not just Los Angeles, but the entire nation's environmental future. Los Angeles history in the 60s and 70s, from smog capital to clean air pioneer. As the smog crisis worsened in the 1950s, Los Angeles could no longer ignore the problem. The newly formed Air Pollution Control District began taking aggressive action. Backyard trash burning was banned. Factories were forced to install filters and scrubbers. Oil refineries, once symbols of the city's prosperity, were pressured to reduce emissions. But despite these early efforts, the smog refused to disappear. In 1955, another devastating smog episode blanketed the city, sickening thousands and making national headlines. Photographs of downtown Los Angeles swallowed in brown haze shocked the country. The city once known for its blue skies and bright sunshine had become the smog capital of the world. For a place obsessed with its image, the ridicule was humiliating. Travel writers who had once called Los Angeles a paradise were now describing it as unlivable. Newspapers across the nation mocked the city, and the political backlash was swift. Residents demanded action, and California lawmakers began passing some of the toughest environmental rules in the United States. The state turned its focus to the root cause, automobiles. By the late 1950s, California ordered car manufacturers to start developing cleaner engines. Soon, automakers were required to install positive crankcase ventilation systems, an early step toward controlling vehicle emissions. This was a historic turning point, the first time any government had forced the auto industry to clean up its products. That decision laid the foundation for later breakthroughs, including the catalytic converter of the 1970s, which would drastically reduce car pollution. Still, for many Angelenos, the damage was already done. Families who had moved west seeking better air for their children now found themselves trapped in one of the most polluted cities on Earth. Schools kept children indoors on bad smog days. Athletes struggled to train outside. Doctors began warning of long-term lung damage, especially among the young. The city that once promised sunshine and health had become a place where the air itself was a public hazard. The smog crisis of the 1950s and 60s shattered the illusion that endless growth came without cost. It changed how people thought about Los Angeles, and about modern life itself. But out of this crisis came something powerful: the birth of the modern environmental movement in California. Residents began to understand that clean air wasn't a gift of geography, it was something that had to be demanded, protected, and fought for. By the end of the decade, Los Angeles had become both a warning and a leader. Other American cities, from New York to Houston, looked to LA as a glimpse of their own future if they failed to act. California's new emissions laws became the strictest in the nation, setting standards that would soon shape national policy. In 1963, Congress passed the first federal Clean Air Act, inspired in part by Los Angeles's painful lessons. What had started as a local environmental disaster in Southern California became a national movement, one that would redefine the relationship between industry, government, and the air Americans breathed. Los Angeles in the 1960s and 70s stood at the center of that transformation, a city struggling to heal its skies, reinvent its identity, and prove that progress didn't have to come at the expense of the planet. Los Angeles history in the 60s and 70s, the legacy of the smog era. Even today, Los Angeles continues to wrestle with smog. The brown haze still lingers over the city on hot summer afternoons, a faint reminder of what once was. But unlike the deadly fogs of the 1950s, today's air no longer blinds drivers or forces residents indoors for weeks at a time. Thanks to catalytic converters, unleaded gasoline, and cleaner fuel standards, Los Angeles transformed from the smog capital of the world into a global model for air pollution control. Every one of those innovations can be traced back to the environmental crisis that once made the city infamous. The smog disaster of the 1950s and 60s was devastating, but it also reshaped Los Angeles and the entire nation. It proved that unchecked growth and industrial expansion came with real costs, and it showed that science, public pressure, and activism could drive change even in the face of powerful industries. In the end, Los Angeles, a city nearly suffocated by its own success, became the birthplace of modern environmental regulation. The lessons learned beneath its brown skies would influence air quality laws across the United States and inspire cleaner cities worldwide. Yet, for those who lived through those dark days, when the sun disappeared and breathing itself became dangerous, the memory remains vivid. It was a time when paradise was poisoned, and the fight for clean air began. If you enjoyed exploring this story of Los Angeles in the 60s and 70s, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to History Love, and turn on notifications. Join us as we uncover more stories that shape the world we live in, one era at a time.